There's a special kind of silence that exists in the split second after your world ends. It's not a quiet silence. It's a vacuum, a sudden, deafening absence of sound where the familiar hum of your life used to be. For me, that silence started at Gate B17 of the Los Angeles International Airport. I was 15 years old, and my mother had just walked away. The air was thick with the smell of jet fuel and floor polish, a scent I would forever associate with betrayal. We were supposed to be starting a new life. Mom had married Rick, a man with a shiny watch and a smile that never reached his eyes, just 3 months prior. Rick had 2 kids, twins my age named Kyle and Caitlin, who looked at me with the same disinterest they might give a piece of airport furniture. The big move to Florida was Rick's idea. A fresh start. He'd sold his business, and we were all going to live in a beachside house. I'd hated the idea. I was leaving my friends, my school, the only life I'd ever known. But Mom had sparkled with a new, frantic happiness. "It's an adventure, Maya," she'd gushed, her hands fluttering. "We'll be a real family." I now know that sparkle was desperation. She was terrified of being alone, and Rick was her life raft. I was just excess baggage threatening to capsize it. The flight was called First Class. Rick, Mom, and the twins headed for the priority lane. I followed with my single, battered suitcase. As I went to hand my ticket to the attendant, a firm hand landed on my shoulder. It was Rick. "Not you, kid," he said, his voice low and final. I looked at him, confused. Then I looked at my mother. Her face, usually so animated, was a mask of cold resignation. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mom," she took a deep breath, as if steeling herself for a difficult business transaction. She handed me a white envelope. "This is for you." "What's going on?" My voice was a squeak, the panic starting to rise like a tide in my chest. "The thing is, Maya," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth, "Rick's new start, it's for his family. And frankly, you've never really fit. You're too much like your father." The words were like physical blows. Too much like your father. The ultimate sin in her book. My father, the man she'd spent years vilifying, the man I hadn't seen since I was 7. "So, what? I'm not going?" I asked, tears welling in my eyes. "You're 15. You're resourceful," Rick chimed in, his tone impatient. "You can figure it out. Figure it out." The 3 most terrifying words a 15-year-old can hear when abandoned in an international airport. "But where will I go?" I pleaded, my vision blurring. My mother's gaze finally met mine, and what I saw there shattered any last hope. It wasn't love. It wasn't even pity. It was a clean, surgical severance. "That's not my problem anymore," she said, each word a nail in the coffin of our relationship. "The envelope has some cash. Consider it a head start." And with that, she turned. She linked her arm through Rick's, and without a backward glance, she walked down the jet bridge with her new, improved family. Kyle and Caitlin glanced back once, their expressions a mix of curiosity and relief that it wasn't them. I stood there, frozen, as the gate attendant gave me a sympathetic but helpless look. The final call for the flight to Miami was announced. I watched the plane push back from the gate, a colossal metal bird carrying away the last shred of my old life. The vacuum of silence was broken by the chaotic sounds of the terminal. A baby crying, a boarding announcement for Phoenix, the roar of a plane taking off. I was alone, profoundly, terrifyingly alone. I stumbled to a row of hard plastic seats and collapsed into one. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside was $500 in cash and a folded piece of paper. It was a photocopy of my birth certificate. That was it. No note of love. No apology. Just a financial transaction and a document proving I existed. $500 and a birth certificate. That was my market value to my own mother. The tears came then, hot and silent. They weren't tears of sadness, but of a pure, undiluted terror that felt like it would stop my heart. What was I supposed to do? Go to the police? Become a ward of the state? Live on the streets? I thought about my father, the estranged father, The man my mother had painted as a cold, work-obsessed monster who cared more about his company than his family. I had a hazy memory of him, a tall man with kind, tired eyes, who used to read me stories and whose laugh was a deep, comforting rumble. But those memories were clouded by years of my mother's poison. He never wanted us, she'd say. He chose his money over you. But as I sat in that airport, facing a future of unimaginable uncertainty, a single, desperate thought formed. What if she was wrong? What if the monster was the only one who would answer the phone? With shaking fingers, I pulled out my cheap prepaid phone. I had one number saved under Dad. I hadn't called it in years. I didn't even know if it still worked. I took a deep, shuddering breath and pressed call. It rang once.
Twice.
A deep, familiar voice answered. Maya? He'd kept my number.
He knew it was me.
The dam broke. The story tumbled out of me in a choked, hysterical sob. She left me, Dad. Mom left me at the airport. She said I didn't fit. She went to Florida with Rick and his kids. She said to figure it out. I don't know what to do. There was a beat of silence on the other end. I braced for rejection. For him to say he was sorry, but it wasn't his problem. Instead, his voice was calm, firm, and filled with a steel I had never heard before. Listen to me very carefully, sweetheart. Are you listening? I sniffled, wiping my nose on my sleeve. Why, yes. Go to the information desk in the main terminal. Tell them you are a minor traveling alone and that you need to be escorted to a private VIP lounge. Tell them your father, Alexander Vance, has arranged it. Do you understand? Alexander Vance. I hadn't heard his full name in years. It sounded powerful, authoritative. A VIP lounge? I whispered, confused. Do not move from that spot until a uniformed airport employee comes to get you. I will be there as soon as humanly possible. How will you get here? I stammered. He lived across the country in New York. Don't you worry about that, he said, his voice softening just a fraction. Just do as I say. I'm coming to get you, Maya. You're coming home. The line went dead. I sat there, clutching the phone, the $500 envelope forgotten in my lap. The terror was still there, but it was now edged with something else. A tiny, fragile flicker of hope. I had called the monster, and the monster was coming for me in a private jet. The woman from the information desk was kind. Her name was Susan, and she had a gentle smile that didn't ask too many questions. She escorted me through the bustling terminal to a discreet door marked Skyview Lounge. Inside, it was another world. The chaotic noise of the airport vanished, replaced by a hushed, carpeted quiet. There were leather armchairs, complimentary food and drinks, and a view of the tarmac where planes glided like silent giants. I felt like an imposter in my jeans and hoodie. I curled up in a chair in the farthest corner, making myself as small as possible. I replayed my mother's words over and over. You've never really fit. Each time, the pain was fresh and sharp. An hour passed. Then 2. I drifted in and out of a nervous sleep, jerking awake every time the lounge door opened. And then I saw it, through the panoramic window, a sleek, white jet with elegant blue striping taxied to a stop directly opposite the lounge. It was smaller than the commercial airliners, but radiated an aura of immense power and expense. The door opened, and stairs unfolded to the tarmac. A moment later, the door to the lounge opened. A man in a pilot's uniform scanned the room. His eyes landed on me. He walked over. Miss Vance, he asked respectfully. The aircraft is ready when you are. My heart hammered against my ribs. I gathered my single suitcase and followed him out a special security door that led directly onto the tarmac. The roar of the engines was overwhelming up close. The pilot gestured for me to board. I climbed the steps, my legs weak. At the top, I paused and looked back at the airport, at the city that had just witnessed my abandonment. Then I stepped inside. The interior of the jet was all soft, cream-colored leather and polished wood. It smelled of coffee and clean, expensive air. And there, rising from one of the plush seats, was my father. He was taller than I remembered. He wore a simple but impeccably tailored dark suit no tie. His hair was grayer at the temples, but his eyes, the same shade of hazel as mine, were exactly as I remembered. They were wide with an emotion I couldn't quite name.
Shock.
Sadness? Love? Maya, he said, and his voice cracked on the single syllable. He didn't move toward me. He just stood there, as if afraid I might vanish. I realized he was giving me space, letting me decide. I dropped my suitcase. It landed with a soft thud on the luxurious carpet. And then I ran. I ran the few steps between us and threw my arms around his waist, burying my face in his chest. I was sobbing again, great, heaving sobs that shook my entire body. His arms came around me, strong and sure. He held me tightly, one hand cradling the back of my head. He didn't say, "It's okay." He didn't offer empty platitudes. He just held me. He let me fall apart, and he was my anchor. When my tears finally subsided, he guided me to a seat and sat opposite me, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. "Tell me everything," he said softly. "From the beginning." And I did. I told him about Rick, about the wedding, about the twins, about the gradual way I had been pushed to the periphery of my mother's new life. I told him about the cold finality in her eyes at the gate. When I finished, I was exhausted, hollowed out. He was silent for a long time, staring out the window at the lights of the city. His jaw was tight. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and dangerous. "She told you I didn't want you," he stated, more than asked. I nodded, fresh tears welling. "She said you chose your work over us." A muscle twitched in his cheek. "Maya, the day your mother left me, she hired the most ruthless divorce lawyer in the state. She demanded full custody. She knew my company was in a precarious position, a make-or-break merger. She said if I fought her for you, she would drag the process out for years, bankrupt me, and ensure the merger failed. She said she would tell you I abandoned you." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a pain I now understood. "She gave me an impossible choice. I could fight for you and lose everything, including, she promised, any chance of providing for you in the future. Or I could sign the papers, give her everything she asked for financially, and she would let me be a part of your life." He took a deep, ragged breath. "I was a fool. I thought if I provided for you, if I built something stable, I could win you back later. I signed the papers. The next day, she moved you across the country and changed her number. She blocked every attempt I made to contact you. The letters I sent were returned unopened. The gifts. Everything. The truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. My whole life, the story I'd believed was a lie. He hadn't abandoned me. He'd been blackmailed. He'd been forced to choose between a fight he was guaranteed to lose and the long, patient hope of one day getting me back. "I have spent every day of the last 8 years regretting that decision," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I built this company into what it is today for one reason, to be strong enough that no one could ever take you from me again." The plane began to taxi. He reached across the aisle and took my hand. His grip was firm. "That ends now. You are never going to feel unwanted again. You're coming home." As the jet soared into the night sky, leaving Los Angeles, and my mother behind, I looked at my father. The monster was a myth. In his place was a man who had loved me all along, a man who had moved heaven and earth to reach me in my darkest hour. I was 15. I had just been abandoned by my mother. But for the first time in my life, I felt safe. The house wasn't a house, it was a home. A sprawling, beautiful home on a quiet, tree-lined street in upstate New York. It was the opposite of my mother's chaotic, ever-changing apartments. This place had roots. My father showed me to my room. It wasn't a guest room. It was clearly a young girl's room, with a bay window seat and bookshelves that were empty, waiting. "I've been ready for you for a long time," he said simply. The weeks that followed were a period of slow, gentle healing. My father didn't smother me. He gave me space, but he was always present. We ate breakfast together every morning. He hired a tutor, so I could finish the school year without disruption. He asked me about my opinions on things. What color should we paint the walls? What kind of trees should we plant in the garden? He was treating me like a person, not a problem. I started therapy. I learned that my mother's actions were a reflection of her own profound brokenness, not a measure of my worth. The sharp, constant ache of her rejection began, slowly, to dull. My father also had a lawyer, a sharp, efficient woman named Ms. Davies. We provided a sworn statement about the abandonment. Ms. Davies filed for emergency full custody, which was granted without a hearing. My father was now my sole legal guardian. But there was one piece of unfinished business. The house in California. My mother's house. My house, in a way. It was still technically my legal residence, and my father was still paying the mortgage on it as part of the divorce agreement, an agreement that stipulated he provide housing for me. One evening, about 2 months after I arrived, my father came into the living room where I was reading. He looked serious. "Your mother is back," he said quietly. "She and Rick, it didn't work out. She's returned to the house in Pasadena." A cold knot tightened in my stomach. The fear returned, the irrational fear that somehow she could still take this new life away from me. "What are we going to do?" I asked, my voice small. "That," he said, sitting down beside me, "is entirely up to you, Maya. The house is yours, in trust until you're 18. The law is on our side. She abandoned you. She has no legal right to be there. We can have her evicted, but it's your past. It's your decision on how to handle it." I thought about it for a long time. I thought about the $500. I thought about the coldness in her eyes. I thought about the 8 years of lies. And I thought about the man sitting next to me who had given me a home without a single condition. I made my decision. "I want to be the one to tell her," I said. Ms. Davies arranged everything. We flew back to California, first class this time. A car service took us to the house I'd grown up in. It looked smaller, shabbier than I remembered. My father waited in the car. "I'll be right here," he said. "You have the papers. You say the words." I walked up the familiar path, my heart pounding. I rang the doorbell. After a moment, the door opened. My mother stood there. She looked tired, older. The sparkle was gone, replaced by a weary defeat. Her eyes widened in shock. "Maya? What are you doing here? How did you get here?" "Dad brought me," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Her face hardened at the mention of him. "I see. So you ran to him." "I should have known." "Did he tell you his lies?" "He told me the truth," I said, cutting her off. "Something you never did." I didn't wait for an invitation. I stepped past her into the living room. It was a mess. Suitcases were piled everywhere. The air smelled of stale takeout and regret. "I'm not here to argue, Mom. I'm here to give you this." I held out the thick manila envelope. She took it, confused. "What is this?" "It's an eviction notice. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. This house is mine. You forfeited any right to be here when you left me at LAX." She stared at the paper, her face turning pale. "You can't be serious. This is my home." "It was my home," I corrected her. "And you made it clear I didn't fit. So now you don't fit. You need to leave." The coldness I had seen at the airport returned to her eyes. "You ungrateful little brat. After everything I did for you, he's turned you against me." "You turned me against you all by yourself," I said, a strange calm settling over me. "You have 30 days. After that, the sheriff will remove you." I turned to leave. I had said what I came to say. "Maya, wait," she cried, her voice shifting to a desperate plea. "It was a mistake. Rick, he pressured me. I was scared. Please, baby, don't do this. We can be a family again." I stopped at the door and looked back at her. I saw her not as my mother, but as a pathetic, selfish woman who was finally facing the consequences of her actions. "You had a family," I said quietly. "You left her at an airport with $500 and a birth certificate. You don't get to call me baby anymore." I walked out, closing the door softly behind me. I didn't look back. I got into the waiting car. My father looked at me, a question in his eyes. "It's done," I said. He simply nodded and started the car. As we drove away, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt clean. I had faced the monster of my past, and I had not let her hurt me anymore. I had taken back my power. The eviction notice wasn't just about a house. It was me evicting her from my life. From my heart. I was closing that door forever. I was going home. To my real home. To the parent who had chosen me, not once, but twice. And this time, the room that waited for me would never, ever be empty.